Welcome to another episode of DD on the Spot. As always, I'm your host, Ryan Johnson. And before we get into it with our guest here, I'd like to remind everyone that if you enjoy this content, to please give a like and subscribe down below. I'd greatly appreciate it. We have Hope Castelli on the podcast. She's coming to us all the way from Nevada, where I don't even want to ask her about the weather because it's probably going to make me angry. But, we're going to eventually. She's an IFBB bikini pro, as well as a personal trainer and a competition and posing coach. So she's a jack of a lot of trades when it comes to the bodybuilding world. But most importantly, she is our current guest. Hope, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me on. I'm excited.
Well, I gotta ask first of all, because I love torturing myself. What's the weather like in Nevada today?
It's honestly very cold today. Reno's always up and down. Like one day you'll have a really hot day, the next day it's like freaking cold. So it's always changing though.
Okay, so what is cold for you? What is that there?
Oh, it was like 19 degrees the other morning when I left to go to the gym. I was kind of pissed. I was like, I put my robe on. I was like, I'm gonna drive with my robe on to the gym.
You know what? I respect that. I never knew that Nevada could ever get that cold because it's currently 5 degrees here, and we're just getting started here. But yeah, so I never actually knew that Nevada. I always thought that Nevada was just like other parts where it's like 100 degrees almost all the time. But so I guess we learn something new every day, everyone. It can get cold in Nevada, which is the most important thing we've learned on this podcast so far. Hopefully, it's not the only important thing, but yeah, so that's actually not as depressed. I usually get very depressed when the guests tell me their answers. So, she made me feel a little bit better. So I can tell this is going to be a very good podcast. So, Hope, why don't you give us your backstory and really tell us what inspired and motivated you to get in shape and how that led to where you're at, being a bikini pro and just your whole journey?
So it started back, honestly, when I was a kid. So I was on a swim team, and then I was also on a gymnastics team, so I did a lot of sports. And then around 12, 13, I developed an eating disorder, which I used to think or try to blame it on that, oh, it's because I needed to be small in gymnastics. But I realized that actually had nothing to do with that. I'm a perfectionist, and a lot of perfectionists end up dealing with something like that. So I was hospitalized when I was 14, and I literally got released on the leap year. So it's either 8 years ago or 2 years ago I was taken out of hospital. So I think that's kind of funny. But yeah, that's kind of what got me into it. I mean, every single time that the doctors would try to tell me to put on weight, I was like, no, like, you're telling me ice cream's healthy. Like, that's not true. You guys trying to have me put on weight. Like, okay, then if I put on weight, I want it to be muscle. So I started trying to do a lot of research on nutrition, on working out. And my dad had introduced me to the gym when I was about 15, 14, 15. And I used to kind of think it was stupid at first because I was like, I'm a gymnast. I don't need to do weight training. Like, you're supposed to be able to get good height in the air, and more muscle is going to make me way more. And then I started learning, and I took off, and I fell in love with lifting heavy. So I started lifting really heavy around 15, 16. And I kind of had in the back of my mind that I wanted to one day compete in bikini, but I knew I needed to put on a lot of muscle and also wanted to be in a healthy place with food before I ever were to do that, because I know how that dieting down, I hear a lot of people can end up with an eating disorder after it. And I was like, okay, well, I already started with an eating disorder before it, so I don't want that to happen. So I lifted for years and competed in powerlifting. A lot of people were telling me to do powerlifting because I was very strong. Like, I weighed about 130 pounds, and I was bench pressing like 170, 175. Like, I was almost squatting 300 pounds. My deadlift was almost 300. So like, I decided, it's time to do a powerlifting competition. And so I missed qualifying nationally by missing my last squat. And had I gone up a little bit heavier in my deadlift, I would have qualified. And so it was always a goal to qualify nationally in gymnastics or in powerlifting. And so I was like, you know what, like, finally, let's just try out bikini and let's see what I can do in the sport. And then I fell in love with it. And so the moment I stepped on stage, I was like, this is it. This is the one I'm going to nationals at.
Yeah, that's awesome. And do you really think that background in swimming and gymnastics really helped you when it came to developing muscle? Because I mean, if you're a gymnast or a swimmer, you already have a pretty nice set of muscle when it comes to it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it definitely did help because gymnastics taught me a lot on how to control my physique, like how to control building the muscle in a sense. You have this, gymnasts are freaks of nature. Like, you have this way of building muscle that I like. One day when I have children, I'm going to put them in gymnastics because it taught me so much about myself and my body. But the work ethic is really where it's at. I mean, you push your body beyond limits. I mean, you're training 6-7 hours a day, So when it came to bodybuilding, I always was pushing myself just as hard. And it's like if I would grab those 70-pound dumbbells, I'd be like, no, go and grab the 80s. Stop, you know?
Yeah. No, and I mean, yeah, gymnastics is cool, but I could have never done it because I'm 6'3". So I mean, that's just disaster waiting to happen right there. If you had a gymnast that was as tall as me, but so yeah, I mean, I have the utmost respect for gymnasts. I mean, they're yeah some of the most dedicated athletes in the world, and I mean, just what they go through, I think, is more than any baseball player or football player like me ever really went through. So just a huge amount of respect for that. But when you were getting starting working out, I mean, I always make the comparison. If you were to walk into a gym with 100 people, there's 100 different ways as to how those people got into shape, whether it comes down to, I mean, their diet, their nutrition, how many reps they do, what exercises they do. So many little things add up to that overall package that people end up seeing. What was that experience like for you, sort of figuring out what worked best for your body? Because if you were to walk up to someone and say, hey, what'd you train for that body part? It looks amazing. What works best for them 99% of the time isn't going to work as good for you.
Right. So I think the biggest thing that helped me was I just had this physique in mind that I wanted, and I knew obviously lifting heavy was going to do that. But I was lifting for quite some time and thought I wasn't seeing changes, but it was because my body fat was kind of staying about the same because I didn't have my nutrition dialed in. I just made it a point that I was gonna, no matter what I ate the day before, whether it was good or bad food, like I was not gonna miss a workout. I was gonna always be in the gym. If I went out partying with friends, if I woke up having, drank too much alcohol, like, oh well, you're still going to the gym. And I always made a point that I would go in. I always thought, the only bad workout is the one that you miss. So even if it's not the greatest workout, you're still getting something in. But I think it was more so when I started to figure out the nutrition aspect. I would go into the gym and always lift heavy, but I wasn't always eating the amount of protein that I should have. So it wasn't until I started to dial that in a little bit more that I really started to notice not just physique changes, but a lot of my weights that I would struggle to lift were just moving so much easier.
Yeah, nutrition is just such a hard part of it. It's a hard part too, but it's something that really just adds up to everything. But we'll get into that right after this question because I love talking genetics on this podcast because so many people there on Instagram and all these other social media sites, oh my god, I want his arms, I want her abs, I want their back. People just don't understand that you can only be the best version of yourself. I don't know how many times I've wanted to just shake people down and be like, you do not know what they took. First of all, to look like that, you don't know, what their diet's like, you don't know how hard they work, and you're not going to end up looking like that. You can only be the best version of yourself. But on top of that, whenever someone first gets started working out, they always have that one body part that really really takes off that they don't have to train as much, and they always have that one body part that just lags behind it they have to train to oblivion to get to catch up. I mean, as everyone on this podcast knows, my back was the one that took off just because naturally I have a really nice back, but being 6'3", my legs and my lower body are just absolutely shot where I could inject pure muscle into them and they wouldn't gain an ounce. But what were those body parts for you when you were getting started?
Body parts that I disliked or
Or
liked.
body parts that really took off for you, and then body parts that you really had to train really hard to get to grow?
Um, Man. So I think shoulders was probably the hardest thing for me to grow. I mean, I would hit shoulders at least twice a week, and I had always just thought that, oh, my biceps and my triceps are the same size as my shoulders. Like we gotta figure it out. So I started to hit shoulders 3, 4 times a week. Not that it was a full solid day of hitting shoulders, but like if I was hitting back, I would throw in some lateral raises and a couple shoulder presses because I knew that was a muscle I had lacked on. So I really had to start putting a lot of effort into that. And then my glutes they took a while to build. I mean, yes, they were there from gymnastics, but the glutes is a big muscle. It's a powerful muscle, so it has to be trained in a powerful way. And I didn't actually start implementing hip thrusts till about maybe 2 years back or a year and a half back. I was always doing squats, deadlifts, like the whole normal like compound movements, but I never was throwing in a lot of glute work. And it wasn't until I started to really target that specific muscle that it took off. And I was like, yes, finally.
Well, yeah, and well, speaking of genetics, holy arm veins. I mean, we can see them the whole time. Have you always genetically had arm veins, or is that something that it just takes off when you're in competition? Because I personally, no matter how big my arms have ever gotten, I've never had veins.
They honestly are the first thing that leans out on my body. I mean, like, the moment I start a prep, within a month, I like, they're veiny already. And
Here,
I'm just
here,
like,
let's
what?
here, let's see,
Crazy.
let's see the guns. Show us the guns. Let's see. Jeez, hang on, hold that for a second. Yeah, that's yeah. Good God, for a bikini girl, that's very, very impressive. Yeah, you definitely got the work in
Thank
there. But
you, thank you.
yeah, that's yeah, those arm. That's the first thing I noticed about her was like, oh, she still got arm veins. Holy crap! Because yeah, that's the one thing I've always wanted, but it's just never got. Are you one of the person that gets veiny all over? Is it just like in the arms? Because we've had people that like have veiny legs, and you're just like, how does that happen?
I've never had, or I've nenever noticed veins in my legs. I think 2 weeks back, I noticed I had a vein in my calf, but that was about it. Like I don't really see them in my legs. I definitely start getting them like in my abdomen when I'm like super super lean. But for the most part, like my shoulders are striated. I have veins coming out through them. Like I just get very vascular up top.
So what are your friends' reactions when you start looking like that? Or like, "Oh my god, you look amazing." Like how have your friends dealt with this overall journey as well? Because I mean, it's a very restrictive lifestyle and you might not be able to go out and socialize as much, but what's their overall reaction been to you adapting and going into bodybuilding?
They're actually very supportive. So a lot of my friends understand too, like when I'm in prep, like I'm in prep, I can't eat certain things, but that doesn't stop me from going out and hanging out with them. A lot of times actually, before COVID and everything, before things were shutting down, like if we would go out to a bar or a nightclub, I would just drink water and I would have just as much fun because I was like, I want to enjoy my life. I might leave a little earlier because I might be tired and might want to go to sleep, but they've all been very supportive and they've seen me working for it and they knew it was my goal. So not once has anyone ever actually questioned it. They've just all been there to help me out.
Well, yeah, when you're looking like that, they're like, we better not mess with her. We better just be like, nod our head and just be like, yeah, Hope, whatever you want. You can go home early. Yeah, just don't. No, I'm kidding. But yeah, that's so great that you have that support because out of all the guests that I've had on, the stories where they don't have as much support, it just makes your journey even harder. So even to have that one little bit of support, I mean, it makes your journey probably so much easier. But now we got to talk the nutrition because I mean, that's one thing that so many people our age don't understand is the most important thing when it comes to this. And I mean, if I could only, just tell so many people like your nutrition has to be good if you want to if you want to make any significant gains. I mean, yeah, you might get beginner gains from working out, but when it comes to sustained growth and healthiness, you need to get your nutrition down. What were some of the bigger changes that you made when you first got started? Because like you said, when you had struggled with eating disorders, I mean, you probably had to put on a lot of weight and a lot of muscle. What were some of the nutritional changes that you made?
So after my eating disorder, when I was in recovery, I started eating like not poorly, but it was just I deprived myself for so long that my food was always kind of like up and down. So like I had said before, I always made it a point that I was in the gym every single day, lifting those heavy weights more so than the cardio because I knew the weights was where it was at. Um, but I used to only eat like a normal person. I would go home, from work, whatever. I'd eat lunch, go back to work, and then come home and eat dinner. Like sometimes I'd eat breakfast if I, got up early enough. Sometimes if I didn't, I'd just like grab a protein shake or something. But I didn't realize that going 5, 6, 7 hours without eating because I was working was actually, slowing my metabolism down and causing me to not be able to build a muscle that I wanted. So I started making small little changes, just adding in like just a little bit of chicken every couple hours or something, just so I was getting some protein in. But I also have a lot of anaphylactic food allergies, so I couldn't just grab, something that someone else could grab. I can't have dairy, I can't have nuts or fish, like I can't eat any of that. So I was very limited. But I just made a point that okay, if you have 10 minutes that you can leave work and go and grab some chicken somewhere that's cooked, like get some protein in. And so those little changes, when I started seeing the weights moving quicker, I was like, okay, I need to start to learn more about nutrition and figure this out because there's really something here, you know.
Yeah. And I mean, especially when you're in that, bikini division, you really got to watch it because, you have to maintain a certain look for bikini. I mean, it's not figure, it's not physique where it's been like that. But have you ever thought about changing divisions or have you always just said, "Hey, I just want to stay in bikini?"
So actually, for my very first show, I had a figure suit made for me, or a figure bottom made for me, and then the little crossover straps I was going to be able to switch out to switch from bikini to figure. And I was kind of told, you should do figure instead. You seem to have a lot of muscle mass, like you're not going to do good in bikini. And I ended up placing fourth at my first show, and I knew I wasn't lean enough, but I was like, you know what? I'm gonna keep on pushing through. Like everyone says, I have a whole lot of muscle. So I kind of upped my cardio a little bit and actually coached myself going into my second show. and then I won the overall in bikini, and so I was like, all right, so screw everyone who was telling me to do figure. Like this is where it's at. So I do step on stage a lot heavier than most girls that are my height, but I mean, I think I hold the muscle well, in a good area.
Yeah. Well, I was just gonna say I was looking at some of her photos and I was like, oh, that's a figure girl, basically. And then I was like, oh, she's a bikini pro. When I looked at that, I was like, oh, wow. So that's amazing that you're able to do that. And that's yeah, so many people. I mean, and we've had so many stories of people who they start one division, then they hop up, and it's just an ever evolving journey. But yeah, I mean, bikini too. I mean, one thing with bikini is that you basically have to have your own flair and your own sass when you walk on that stage. Was that something that you naturally just have, or was that something that you really had to work on in your like stage persona?
I think it did come a little bit natural because you did have that little bit of dance kind of background you had to have in gymnastics. So I really think that helped me more than anything. But I did have to put a lot of work into it. I mean, there were days I did not want to pose, but I told myself, even if it was just 10 minutes of posing time, like that was what I was gonna do. And I would pose every single day that I was in prep. Sometimes it was that one time where I would, miss out on it because I was too tired, but I made a point that I was always trying to work on my walk, always trying to work on my routine and just, make sure I didn't have arms flailing when I was doing my routine because I know it distracts the judges. But I'm very nitpicky, so I'll like watch my routine and go, nope, that didn't look good. Need to turn this a little more. So that goes in hand with being a perfectionist.
Yeah, absolutely. And when it comes to posing, I mean, that's the hardest thing for so many competitors. Out of all of your poses that you do for bikini, because I know you just do, it's more than figure, but it's a lot of more mandatories. Like you don't do the flexes that people associate with bodybuilding because that's mainly physique and bodybuilding. But what was the hardest pose for you to do, and what was the easiest pose for you to do?
Um, I mean, as far as like holding it, I think my front pose is my coach even calls it. He's like, it's my money shot. Like I have a very solid front pose, but that was the hardest one for me to really work on because you have to twist. Like you have to twist so much to make your waist look so small and keep those glutes looking big and keep the shape and the symmetry. And I mean, I put a lot of work into that because I knew it was my strong point. But also the back pose, like even to this day, I'm still trying to figure it out. I'm still hitting it different. Like we just discovered that I have to kind of flex my glutes a little bit in order to have a hamstring tie in. If I don't, it's like not even existent. So that one is hard in the fact that it's just more so trying to figure out what works so they can see that tie in, because that's where I hold on my body fat.
Well, and one problem that a lot of women experience is like the flaring of the lats for really like any pose, just like getting the arms out and getting them normal. Was that difficult for you? Because so many people, especially women, that is the hardest thing for them is just learning how to get that back done properly.
So actually, the way I taught myself how to flare my lats was because I had thought I was going to eventually do figure. So I was teaching myself how to hit that figure front pose. So it's super easy for me to activate my lats now. That if I'm in my back pose, I just gotta flex them a little bit, and I think it does help my taper. I do know that a lot of judges have said that they don't want them flexing their lats because it's not figure, it's bikini. But I also do have, a lot of muscle I hold, so I have to kind of figure out what works for me and what doesn't. And so a little bit of a flare does help me with that symmetry.
Absolutely. And also being a posing coach, I mean, what are some of the biggest struggles that you deal with clients when it comes to posing?
I think the biggest thing is that I feel like a lot of people don't practice as much as they should. Um, I know I would probably looked a little awkward at first too when I started posing. I mean, like I even go and look back at some of my videos and I'm like, oh my god, that's how I looked, you know. But I think that the biggest thing is that a lot of females don't work on their walk. So they really just go out and they just make sure they hit their routine, but they're not realizing that they're also being judged on the moment that they walk out on that stage. They're being judged the moment they're standing there. Like the judges are looking at them. If you're on stage and you can see the judges, they can see you. So that walk is, very critical because the bikini sport is, yes, the whole physique and the symmetry, but it's also the one that I think is a little bit more sexy like, and the judges want to see that. And if you have an awkward kind of a walk to come out, they're gonna look at it a little differently.
Yeah, no. There's so many little things, and like when you said your back pose was one of the hardest, that would be my bread and butter, just because, not even because my back is nice, but just because that's the one pose where you can put your smile down. You don't have to be smiling the entire time, because many people who get into this don't realize that your jaw muscle is probably going to be the most sore thing after these shows, because you just have to be smiling the entire time. And you're just like, yeah, everything's great. I'm so dieted down, I'm so depleted, and I'm about to pass out, but I'm doing great. How are you guys doing? So yeah, that's just the little things that most people don't understand, and a lot of people don't get that. I mean, when you're on stage posing for that amount of time, I mean, we've had people on that talk about, it's harder than your workouts, just because the muscle is not meant to be flexed for that long of a period of time. But especially when it came to your journey, when they announced your name and you realized, oh my God, I'm a pro now. What was that feeling like? Because for anyone out there who might not be that familiar with bodybuilding, I mean, winning your pro card for so many of these competitors is the highlight of their career, just because that's the affirmation that all that hard work that they put into, the look that they have is finally paid off. What was that feeling like for you?
So I had literally just came from third call outs at Universe. So I had gone into this show and I was like, all right, like, whatever happens, happens. And if I don't get my pro card at this one, then I'm going to go to USA's. So it was actually the very first competition that I had done where I was like, whatever happens, happens. Normally I go in there with expectations. And I actually went into this super relaxed and was, calm about it. And then when they put me center stage, I was splitting center with my friend Kiki. When they put me center stage, I was like, "Holy cow! Like this is actually happening!" And I was shaking so much on stage. And then when finals came around, and they started calling the girls for their placings, I was trying so hard not to cry. I was like, "I'm not gonna cry. Like it's fine. You're fine. Don't worry about it." And the moment that they called me and I was standing in there, I started crying because it's been a long journey. I started thinking back to like what brought me into the sport. Everything that I had gone through with my eating disorder. All the trauma, all the triumphs that has happened in my whole life just was so worth it for that very moment, and I wouldn't change a thing. So
No, and that's just great. And I mean, the closest I can ever compare to that is like pitching in state tournaments and stuff where, yeah, I mean, that's a moment where, I mean, if you can find that, where you can feel that for any amount of time, if you can find that in your life, I mean, honestly, stick with it, because it's very rare in a lifetime to find something that, can really give you that much joy. But now we go to one of the myths that I love to talk about, because, it's gotten better the last 5 years due to Instagram, but there are still so many women that have that fear that, if they walk into the gym and they pick up one weight, they're going to put on 50 pounds of muscle. And like I told you before, you'd be the first ever trillionaire, because everyone would want to know what you were doing. I mean, you would be the government would probably kidnap you and do like science experiments on you and be like, how did this person manage to do it? But did you ever have that fear when you were getting started? And even if you didn't, I mean, being that you're a coach and a personal trainer, I bet you hear that. I bet if you had a nickel for every time you hear that, probably be the next Bill Gates. So how do you like to respond to that?
So I actually was never afraid of getting like bulky or whatnot because I did have a physique in mind that I wanted to look like. So I was always trying to lift super heavy, and I loved when I would outlift some guys. I was just like, oh yeah, like I lifted that. But I do have so many clients that they're either saying, oh well, I don't want to gain any weight. I'm like, okay, well, you're gonna gain weight, but you're gonna lose muscle, or you're gonna lose body fat. So your weight's kind of gonna stay the same, but you're gonna shrink. And a lot of times they don't grasp that concept. So it's constantly like repetition after repetition. And the biggest thing I tell them is I'm like, hey, give me 3 months and follow everything that I say. If you do not like how you look, all you gotta do is just stop lifting weights, and the muscle mass eventually is gonna kind of, have a little muscle atrophy. So then when they've been lifting for months, they're like, well, why haven't I seen any change in my body? I'm like, do you not get how long it takes to put muscle on? Like, that's when I think they really start to realize that, okay, if you go in and grab a 5 pound dumbbell, you're not going to put on any muscle.
And again, if that does happen to you, give me a call, because I'm just waiting for that to happen. But so far, no one has responded to that. But yeah, I mean, yeah, so many people. And I mean, they also mentioned the one word that I just want to, I basically want to choke them out if they ever mention the word tone, because it's like when you're saying tone, you really mean muscle. Because what do you think what do you think it's going to become when you trim down the fat? What do you think is going to, unless you want to be like a skeleton, what else do you think there's going to be if there's, oh, I just want to trim, I just want to tone everything up? And I always correct them. I was like, oh, so you just want to have muscle? And they're like, no, I just want to tone. It's like, okay, let me walk you through step by step what you mean when. So yeah, that's one that just gets me going. But yeah, I mean, especially in our generation too, where everyone wants everything now and they want it yesterday. They want that Amazon package that they ordered, a day ago to be on their front doorstep right now. This is a lifestyle that you cannot get into if you're expecting immediate results, because it's just, yeah, it's just hard like that. So yeah, it's just, that's one of the important ones. But one thing that I think impacts women so much more than men when it comes to working out positively is the confidence boost that it gives you. I mean, we have heard hundreds of stories on this podcast of, women who have been able to take that confidence boost and use it to impact every single aspect of their life. And, I always say that's the one thing that you can take from the gym and use to impact your life. How have you personally taken that confidence boost that working out's given you and use it to impact your life in a positive way?
So it's helped me a lot because when I started doing personal training, it was literally right after my 18th birthday. So I knew I wanted to be a trainer when I was 15, and I had asked the guy who became my boss if I could start working there, and he's like, "You're not legal, you can't do that." So I started studying for my NASM. I actually felt kind of like I had to be like the rest of the trainers at my workplace. They were all very experienced. So I started to lift and really push myself because I wanted people to take me seriously as a trainer. I didn't want them to just look around like I was some dinky little 18-year-old that didn't know what they were doing. So that actually helped boost my confidence a lot because when I started to see the changes in my physique, other people did as well. And it just kind of helped me overall because from having an eating disorder where I didn't feel confident to starting to get into weight training, that confidence built so much that like especially when I started to compete, I had a lot of people telling me like, "Well, you look like you're standing a little taller," and I was like, either it's confidence or either it's because I'm posing and I have to have good posture, like one or the other. But it definitely helped me a lot, and it helped me, kind of figure out who I am. So.
And that is just so great. And again, that's one of, there's so many more mental benefits than physical benefits when it comes to this sport. But I mean, talking just about the mental journey, I mean, this is 100 times more of a mental journey than it is a physical journey, and people do not understand that because obviously they'll see the changes physically and they'll be like, "Oh, Hope, you look amazing," but no one ever gets the fact that, I mean, it's a mental transformation as well. How have you dealt with this whole journey mentally? Because I mean, it's one of those lifestyles where, I mean, you're gonna have your days where you hate it, you're gonna have your days where you absolutely love it, and it's such a mind game.
It really is a mind game. Honestly, like last year when I was prepping for my last two shows, I was working about 12 hours a day on top of trying to find time to meal prep and pose and get my workouts in. That I would sometimes get up and get to the gym around 4:30 in the morning when I'd already gone to bed at like 1:30 that night. So I do not know to this day how I functioned through prep and made it through, but I just knew that I had a goal so strong in my heart that I wasn't gonna let anything stand in my way. And if that meant you were gonna sleep 3 hours, so be it. You know.
Were you just basically addicted to caffeine then?
I did drink a lot of caffeine, but I couldn't drink an extreme amount of it because then I'd stay up even later. But it was just it was definitely helping me. I mean, there would be times I'd walk in the trainer's office and I'd be like, "Where's my pre-workout? I need a little bit." So I'd eat pre-workout in between clients.
I mean, I'm one of those people where if I don't get my proper amount of sleep, I'm not getting up out of the bed. I mean, unless it's like a holiday, like when I was a young kid, if it was Christmas, then yeah, I'm getting up. But like literally, there were times before school that my dad had to come in and like flip my bed over so that I'd get on the floor then so that I'd wake up because yeah, I'm dead unless I get that proper amount of sleep. So yeah, just that you're able to function on that, that's just absolutely incredible. Because yeah, for me, 3 hours, I couldn't even work out that day. Even if it was just for one day, I'd be like, oh well, today's gonna be an off day then because I just can't do it. And again, that just shows whenever anyone ever asks like why I don't compete, I'll just compare her story to mine, and that's the difference. When it comes to mental strength, when it comes to this sport, that's one of the reasons why I could never really compete myself. But another myth that I love to bust, because for the general public, so many people don't understand that look that you present on stage, that is not a sustainable look. You're not going to be able to look like that 365 days out of the year. And I think it's like shows like Biggest Loser where people come on and they lose, hundreds of pounds, and a lot of them are able to keep the weight off. People look at that and then they just look at bodybuilding. They just assume, oh, they work even harder than those guys on Biggest Loser. They should be able to, maintain that stage look just because as your body gets leaner and leaner, you should be able to maintain it just because you work out so much. But they don't get that, you've depleted yourself, all the dieting that goes into it, all of the, extreme measures that go into it. What was that like for you when you first realized that, oh my God, this look that I present on stage, I mean, this is just temporary. I mean, it might last another day at most, and then I'm going to start to, slowly gain more muscle. What was that like? And has it gotten easier for you as your career has gone on to accept that fact that, your body is going to get bigger?
So last year was my very first year of competing. So when I had hit off season, it was hard for me because it was around the holidays. I literally got off stage and just jumped right into Thanksgiving. And I had also been super depleted from the amount of cardio I was doing, and I really was not eating a whole lot of calories to get stage ready at that time. So I had a little bit of a hard time reversing, but I did make it a fact that I was still gonna get in the gym and bust my butt. But I only had about 6 weeks of an off season before I started prep again. So when I started prep early this year in January, I had eventually switched coaches, and the coach that I currently have now was feeding me a lot more food at first, and I was just kind of freaking out. I was like, "There's no way I'm gonna drop weight and get stage ready eating this many calories." But it was amazing because like he literally fixed my metabolism. I think my metabolism had been wrecked from last year's depletion, um, but it definitely makes it hard at times when you go from being stage lean to then hitting off season. You get, a little softer and you don't have veins, but I try to, still do my very best to eat healthy to maintain a lower body fat percentage because I am a lot heavier on stage than most girls, so that I do have about 10 pounds more muscle. So when I'm in off season, I'm kind of like, well, 130 is kind of where I would like to be. I literally am only 5'2.5", so like 130 is heavy for me. But I'm sitting at 130 right now, and I'm only at 10% body fat. So it's like I just kind of roll with it, and I just know based off of how I'm feeling. Then I just have to not get in my head about it anymore, and I really don't get in my head about it as much as I used to.
Yeah, and I mean she's a month post show now, and she's still got the lean look, so that's impressive. But how are you able to do it, especially during the holidays? Because I mean, I just want to eat really now. I mean, I'm waiting for next 2 weeks from now for Christmas Eve when I just pig out. So how do you deal with the holidays?
Oh gosh, I feel the same way. So literally, when I got off stage after my pro debut, that whole week, I was definitely enjoying a lot of cookies, a lot of desserts that my mom was making because I didn't get to have a whole lot of it throughout the year. I would get cheat meals, so I did get to enjoy a little bit, but I just try to really keep my nutrition on hand as best as I can. Right now, I'm still keeping up with cardio as my calories are increasing, just because when you go from eating very little to flip flopping, I don't want to like balance and gain a lot of body fat. So keeping up with my cardio, trying to do the very best with eating all of my meals I need to, and if someone presents a dessert, like I can go and have the dessert. Why? Because I've been on my meal plan like the rest of the time. So I do follow my meals, and then if someone has something to eat, I'm like, sure, why not? Like I'm off season now.
Hey, that is a great attitude to have. But you mentioned cardio, and that is a trigger word for me because I hate it more than life itself. I mean, the bane of my existence because I remember being a baseball pitcher. That's really all we did during practices. We went out and ran because you need to have nice, strong legs. And I told you before, legs is the one thing that suffered for me. I mean, I was all upper body when I pitched, and I was still throwing really hard. So goes to show you I'm just genetically not one of those people that's meant to have a nice lower body, which is, I mean, unfortunate. But what is your relationship with cardio like?
um, I actually enjoy it. I So when I had my eating disorder, I used it as a kind of like a bad thing. And so I ended up hating cardio because I had this bad mindset around it. But when I developed a healthier mindset about it, I started to enjoy it more. I normally hate running in general because I get shin splints, but my coach had thrown in a lot of running for me actually in the last two preps I did for my IFBB Pro show, and then when I got my pro debut. So I started to really enjoy it then. It's more so I have to have good music on, and then if I do steady state, I'll kind of watch like YouTube videos, or that's my time to respond to my clients or to respond to any people's text messages because I do get very busy throughout the day that I kind of get sidetracked. So I do use my cardio time to respond to people.
No, that's one thing. I mean, if there's not a movie on or anything entertaining to watch, I'm not gonna do it. I mean, it's just but it's been one thing, especially during this pandemic, that I've had to adjust and do a little bit more. But speaking of the pandemic, I mean, that's one thing that we would have never expected to impact our lives the way it did. How have you been dealing with this pandemic, knowing that you were on prep in January and you probably had to go on prep for a long time because these shows kept getting delayed?
Yeah, so it was a little bit hard at first. When the first show got canceled, the first thing I did was I was like, well, I'm going to the store getting me some Oreos. I was like, that's how I'm gonna deal with this. And I just kept pushing through. I knew that I wanted to end my 2020 as a IFBB pro, and so I purchased a lot of weights, barbells, dumbbells, like weight plates, and then I actually found a Smith machine that has like cables attached to it, the whole 9 yards, and I spent my stimulus check on that because I was like, I'm not gonna not work out. So that was probably the biggest thing that helped me through prep. And I bought an elliptical. I was like, I'm not gonna go outside and run into February. It's a freezing. So that's what helped me through the prep.
Well, and how did you deal with it, just mentally, just because, during this pandemic, everything was so uncertain and, you still had to keep this mindset of I still need to be on track when so many people were just wondering what was going to happen the next day.
I mean, I just literally kept focused on the fact that, okay, next show, next show. This is just giving me more time to improve. I knew that I had literally only had 6 weeks of an off season before I had started prep in January. So when things started getting pushed back, I kind of looked at it as a benefit to me because I had only had 6 weeks. So I just started kind of upping my calories a little bit. I was like, I got to lift heavy. I need to still build muscle. And so that was probably the biggest thing, is that I just looked at it more so as a blessing to help me get that pro card because I know I needed to work on my glutes. That was the feedback I kept getting. So I was like, I got another couple months.
Yeah. No, and that's great too that you had that extra time, and a lot more people, I think they have more time to work out, so that was a positive as well. But one body part, I mean, so I made this poll before New Year's last year of what's one body part that people are looking forward to growing the most, and the answers were arms, back, abs, legs. I had like six more things, like really specific things, but arms won by like 20% because probably a lot of guys voted, and that's how we communicate. And obviously, we can see your arms. So what do you train for arms to get them to look like that? Because especially when you're in bikini, you got to be careful because if your arms get too big, I mean that could actually be a docked against you.
Yeah. So actually, I do not train biceps or triceps. I think that I are like this because I used to hit biceps and tricep like solidly twice a week. And when I bench press, I still get the tricep work there. So I really don't try to hit them because I don't want them to blow up. And when I was prepping for Universe, my coach actually told me to stop hitting arms, and I told him I actually wasn't training them. And he was like, "Okay, well, stop hitting shoulders." So I stopped training shoulders and chest and arms or anything altogether going into that show, and was only actually hitting back and legs. And then going into my pro show, I decided to switch back, and so I started throwing shoulders back in because I just needed a little bit more conditioning. They had said, but yeah, no, I don't really. Occasionally, I'll do a bicep curl here and there because I miss doing them, but I don't really train them.
This is BS, everyone. This is just making me lose my faith in everything health and fitness. But that's an answer that I've actually gotten a lot from the figure and the bikini girls, is because yeah, you need to be maintained in portion in that. So yeah, that's great. But if someone were to walk up to you and say, Hope, we made the decision, you can change one thing about the bodybuilding lifestyle, and everyone would go along with it, what would be one thing that you would like to see changed?
Oh gosh, I don't know. I think I think it would be the stigma of that you shouldn't be lifting heavy, because you do see a lot of bikini girls that lift this super lightweight and high reps, and that might work well for them. But I do know what works for me is to lift super heavy, and sometimes I like to max out on my squats and bench and deadlift, and occasionally max out on that shoulder press. Like I know that's what works for me, and I think the biggest thing is that people should realize that bikini competitors can do that without blowing up. Like, I do see a lot of people lifting all this light weight, and I think they can make more changes in their physique if they did challenge themselves a little bit more. But that would be the one thing that I would say to change.
No, and that's one thing as well too, where it's like, yeah, no matter. I mean, I've had some of the smaller people on the podcast that they're just putting up this great amount of weight and they still don't gain as much. It just depends on the person. We have some people who they can work out for a year and they gain a huge amount of muscle, and other people they could do the same thing, and it just depends on your body type. But you mentioned before that you were doing powerlifting. Have you ever thought about getting back into powerlifting, because you were putting up some pretty good numbers like you were saying?
It's it's funny. I did have a couple of my friends ask me. They're like, "So are you gonna do powerlifting again?" And I was like, "No, I don't think so. I mean, like, honestly, if I wanted to, I could just jump into one just for the heck of it. I don't think I would, qualify nationally. Like, I don't really have a goal for anything like that. But would it be fun to just one day register and just jump in on it? Of course it would be. But I don't know because I don't really get to do squats as often as I used to before. I would kind of feel pretty bad if I only got like 250 on a squat. I'd be like, that's pretty bad.
Hey, that's pretty. I mean, if you do twice your body weight, basically, I mean, that's still really, really impressive. But if we were to talk to you a year from today, where would you like to be at in your overall life? What are some goals that you'd like to have achieved? What are some, bodybuilding things you're looking forward to? Where would you like to be at in your life if we were to talk to you a year from today?
Oh gosh, I want to be on the Olympia stage. I really do. I went into this year hoping to, get my pro card, qualify for the Olympia, and hit the Olympia stage this year. It's pretty big dreams for only having competed for a little bit over a year, but I have my goals, and I did tell my parents I wanted to step on stage with Angelica, and then I did actually compete with her at Battle of Texas. So dream came true. But I do want to be on that 2021 Olympia stage. So as soon as I get the go ahead from my coach to, start prep, I know I need an off season right now, but as soon as he says to go, I'm gonna hit up as many pro shows as I can till I qualify.
What's one area of your physique that you're working on most during this off season that you think you need to improve most?
Definitely my glutes. I had talked to Tyler Mannion after my pro debut, and he just said that I needed more depth in my glutes, and that has literally been my feedback ever since I've competed was to just keep working on my glutes. So I know I have the rest of the symmetry down where they want it. They, just keep saying it's those glutes. So I'm hitting them a solid 3 times a week. And I can't walk today, but it's a happy ending, so it's good.
I mean, yeah, legs don't. Yeah, I mean, that's just the worst thing ever. I mean, I can never. Yeah, I just never did get it with legs. I mean, it's just absolutely ridiculous. But how is your sleep now? Because sleep is the most important thing when it comes to recovery, when it comes to just this overall life. I mean, and plus, when you're a bodybuilder, sleep is 10 times more important than it really is. And I mean, going off 3 hours of sleep, I mean, that's just insane. But how is your sleep now? Have you found that it's back to normal?
Yeah, so actually, when COVID hit, half of my clientele disappeared because, they were scared to come back to the gym. So my hours actually got cut a lot, and I don't work as many hours a day as I was before, which is pretty good because I do actually get to spend a little bit more time with my family and my friends that I wasn't able to do before. I can spend time with my dog too. And so I'm able to kind of balance that out that, I get 5, 6 hours of sleep. If I'm on a good day, maybe I'll get 7. But generally, I don't get an 8 hour sleep because I'm a little bit of a night owl. So I don't sleep very easily. But I do have to get up early in the morning because I like to lift before I start work. But we're doing a lot better with sleep
Well,
now.
good because I'm a night owl too, and I always was because I used to work nights before COVID. And now I'm currently out of work for the time being. So yeah, I'm going to bed sometimes around like 3 or 4. So when you were getting up for your prep, I mean, I was going to bed sometimes. So yeah, it's amazing what how different people can be. But when it also comes to just the general public's reaction, I mean, if you were to walk out in public like you are, dressed like you are right now, I mean, you're gonna get stares. It's just because it's human nature when they see something that isn't of the normal, especially being your age. I mean, especially I bet going out to bars if you look the way that you look. I mean, you're probably the center of attention. Guys are like, "Oh, I'm gonna arm wrestle or something like that," because that stupid stuff happens all the time. Especially with me when I was in college, girls would come up and feel my arms without even me asking, and I'd just be like, "Let's be honest, I was vain back then, so I'd pump it up for them a little bit, because it was just a thing." But what has been your overall experience with that reaction like? Because I mean, you're sort of like a mini celebrity when you walk out, just because you naturally draw people's attention with the way that you look.
Oh, well, thank you. I mean, some of my friends have told me that they think I intimidate guys because, like, I do get a lot of guys that I see look at me, but it's very rare, like, for a lot of people to come up and talk to me. And when I work out in the gym, like, I go in, I get my stuff done. Like, I don't talk to anybody. I just kind of do my own thing. Um, I'm a little bit shy too. That, like, if I don't know anybody, I won't talk. Like, I'm very timid. If you come talk to me, I will not shut up after that. But I don't know, like the biggest thing that I get when what guys say to me is they're like, "Hey, do you work out?" And I'm like, "Yeah, just a little bit,
You,
just
you just,
occasionally."
I mean, if I ever, I used to get that all the time, and I always said no. This is just naturally, just eat
Just
your
that.
eat your vegetables. This all comes naturally. But yeah, that's and I mean it's so great that you have that experience too. I mean, at least because it just really shows all that hard work and that it shows that people are paying attention to. But before we wrap things up, is there anyone that you'd like to give a shout out to?
I would love to give a shout out to my family. They have helped me so much through my prep and just being understanding of, some days I am a little bit moody and some days I am very happy. But I'd love to give a shout out to my family and to my coach for helping me through this year. I mean, I wouldn't be where I was at if it weren't for any of them. So very, very grateful.
Well, yeah, and a shout out to again to them, and everyone. I'll leave a link to Hope's Instagram and all that stuff down below where everyone can go and check her out, and buyer beware. You will be inspired to get off that couch and stop eating those Twinkies, and yeah, you're gonna want to work out just after following her for a while. And again, Hope, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story and talking with us. It was really great, and we wish you nothing but the best in this upcoming year.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on here. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. And is there anything else that you'd like to say before we wrap things up?
No, but I hope everyone has a wonderful Christmas. Merry
Yes,
Christmas.
that too. This will be coming out probably right after Christmas, so everyone will, what, probably have already had one. But for anyone who's listening now, I mean, I hope you have a good holidays, Happy New Year, and all that jazz. And hopefully, we get through all of this together, and hopefully this pandemic is over soon. So, and I'm telling anyone, as soon as I get that second shot of the vaccine, I'm not wearing a mask the rest of my life. I don't care what anyone says. I'm walking into any place, and if anyone gives me crap, I'm saying I'm vaccinated. Go screw yourself. I don't care. I don't care. But again, you guys, this is Ryan Johnson, DD on the spot, signing out. Oh, hang on one second. I couldn't think of a better way to end this. Can you give us another? Can you give us another gun show? Just because I'm working arms today, so I need to be I need to be
Oh, of
inspired.
course, gladly.
Yeah. Hey, just hold that for a second, everyone. That is just for especially for a bikini girl. That is just absolutely insane.
Black.
Good God. So again, you guys, this is Ryan Johnson, DD on the spot, signing out. Have a great day, everyone.